This episode is part of the Pool's Local Officials Stronger Together podcast series. It's one way we serve local officials through integrity, public service, fiscal responsibility, and operational excellence. As always, please direct specific questions about coverage to your risk management advisor.
Welcome to episode 40 of the TML Risk Pool's Local Officials Stronger Together podcast. I'm your host, Scott Houston. Today's episode is about wildfire risk and mitigation. In the wake of the horrifying fires we saw in California, I wanted to see what the risk is in Texas, how you can raise awareness of mitigation in your community, and talk to one city that's done it right. We'll be hearing from Heather Gonzalez, a wildfire prevention expert at Texas A&M's Forest Service, and Garrett Spradling, the city manager at Borger. So let's get right to our guests. Okay, welcome back. I'm joined by Heather Gonzalez today. Thank you so much for being with us, Heather.
Thank you for having me.
Heather's with the Texas A&M Forest Service. Tell me a little bit about what the Forest Service does. What's its role in the state of Texas?
So Texas A&M Forest Service provides leadership and technical assistance statewide to ensure our trees, forests, and any related natural resources are sustained and healthy. The agency also supports states' incident response capabilities. We are the leading agency for wildfire response and also respond to a range of all hazard incidents like hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods.
Wow. And so you're a wildfire prevention specialist there. Tell me how you came to work there and specializing in this wildfire stuff.
I started with Texas A&M Forest Service in 2017 as a regional wildland urban interface coordinator. I covered the South Texas region. And as a WUI coordinator, is what they kind of call us, a WUI, I coordinated local prevention and preparedness programs and mitigation project, and also acted as a public information officer on wildfire incidents that we responded to. But a few years ago, I moved to a program specialist position for fire information education. When I was a WUI, I always enjoyed the educating the public part about how to prepare for wildfires. And now I get to do that on a statewide level. So really, really enjoy what I get to do.
That's awesome. We've definitely sounds like we got the right person to talk to today. Are you an Aggie?
Yes, I am.
All right. Whoop. That's awesome. So we've all seen the devastation in California recently, and I think a lot of folks in Texas' minds are on what could happen here. Could something like that happen here? And our members are typically small to medium-sized cities and other local governments, many of which are very susceptible to wildfires. So I guess my question is, what should a mayor or city council member or a city manager know about wildfires in Texas?
I think the most important part to know is to know the risk of your communities, which of your communities are at the highest risk, and then take steps to mitigate the risk and educate the public and make them aware of the risk. So there is a website called texaswildfirerisk.com that is a great resource to identify different risk themes within your local communities.
Okay, that's awesome. That's a really good point. I mean, Texas is a really large state, and there's lots of different types of wildfire risks, I imagine, right? I mean, the Panhandle has prairies, and East Texas has forests, and so there's probably a lot of different things that different city officials should know.
Yes, sometimes wildfires and fire behavior, it's very, very hard to sometimes assess what fire is going to do. Sometimes fires can be very wind driven, like in the Panhandle. Whenever you have really strong winds, those fires are very, very wind driven. But when you go to other parts of the state, sometimes the fires are fuel driven. And so sometimes it just depends on what vegetation is there. And sometimes it just depends on weather conditions. So it's great to be prepared for all aspects of that.
Well, I'm so glad I got to talk to you today. Heather, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. No problem. Thank you for having me.
right, guys, welcome back. I'm here with Garrett Spradling, who's the city manager of Borger. Welcome, Garrett.
Good afternoon.
Hey, it's a real pleasure to have you here. On the first half of the podcast, we, of course, talked to the Texas Forest Service about wildfire prevention efforts, but we really wanted to reach out to one of our members who's dealt with this on the ground, and we knew that Borger has been in an area that's been hit with wildfires in the past. Tell me about what type of fires you've had in the past there.
Yeah, so, for both better and worse, we're kind of on the Canadian River breaks up here by the Canadian River, which provides, a lot of some terrain difficulties when wildfires do get started. And so then you funnel that with high winds and you can get, really fast-moving, dangerous, and almost unstoppable wildfires. And for me, that experience started in 2006, which up until last year had been the largest wildfire in state history, started 3 miles south of Borger. And in 2006, what became known as the East Emerald Complex fire burned about, I think, somewhere over 800,000 acres. And in the Panhandle, 12 people died because of that fire, including the sister of the Borger fire chief at that time. And so that really kind of started our path down wildfire mitigation. And so I think we all saw the dangers that could do, especially with that fire being only 3 miles south of Borger. And so that kind of started us on our wildfire journey.
I've never been in a wildfire before. I'm sure it's a terrifying experience. I'm going to link to an article below the podcast that talks a little bit about what y'all have done. I did see, I think that y'all have a dedicated employee at the city. What else have you done recently to help protect the city and the city's residents?
Right. So we started with, of course, our Community Wildfire Protection Plan, what's called a CWPP, and that started back in 2007. And as part of that, we also created what we call our Rural Urban Interface Hazard Mitigation Program. And so this was an ordinance that gave our employees authority to work in the urban interface, reducing fuels, either by fire mitigation, which you might see us do a little more now, but also just through cleaning up properties and then going out into the county and addressing some of those concerns before it gets into the community. So that started in 2006 with a $50,000 line item. Now in 2024, the fire mitigation department has 5 full-time employees and a budget just under $600,000.
Wow.
We've been able to grow that because they actually do work for our local industry around here. We mitigate terrain around our critical infrastructure, and they pay us to do that. So we're able to offset a lot of our cost from that revenue. And then we also, of course, help state through TIFMAS and some of those other deployments. But as part of that process, we identified a significant amount of burn modules throughout our community that we burn on a regular 3-year rotating schedule, which one of those, being known as a 7-mile burn, is the burn that we did in November of 23 that prevented the Smokehouse Creek fire or the Windy Deuce fire from coming into the Borger city limits in February of 2024.
Wow. So you've got I read about one employee. You've got several employees dedicated to this in a pretty large budget. And has it been effective? I mean, how did that fire break work when the fire came through? Did it just go around the city literally, or how did that work?
It pretty much stopped. So it ran into the break and for the most part stopped. Now it had some little, push into the area, but one of the benefits of mitigating either, through fuels reduction, whether that's, mowing or prescribed fire, is by reducing the fuel, the fire behavior improves. And so firefighters can be more proactive in their response. So now instead of it moving at 45 miles an hour, there's less material to burn, so it slows down and the crews can actually make headway. But in this case, it mostly contained it. We had a few embers catch one property on fire that was in an industrial area that was mainly just, it was not maintained. And, so we talk about risk mitigation, for homeowners and cities and businesses, we all know that we need to maintain our properties. And we've got good examples over there where this one property that burned was on either side of 2 properties that were maintained that did not burn. But because of that mitigation, those fuel reductions both behind it and next to it, the fire crews were able to get that put out. And I think what makes that even more compelling is that at that time, we didn't have any other help because they were all on the big fires in Fritch and the other fires up in Stinnett. So we were able to protect the southern flank of the city of Borger with our 2 staffed wildfire apparatus and 1 engine.
Wow, that's impressive. And so these large-scale mitigation efforts, it sounds like most of that's on private property. How does that work? Do you get permission from the owners, and are most of them welcoming to you?
Most of them are. Of course, we're lucky on the south side of Borger is the 4-6 Ranch. So we can do a lot of that with just one property owner. Mm-hmm. Now, inside the city limits where we have some of those areas, we use our authority for health and safety, just like you would with code enforcement, to do it. And so your code a lot of times doesn't necessarily tell you how you can mitigate those weeds that are too tall. So in our big drainage areas and private property, sometimes we do that with prescribed fire, but under our authority through the health and safety code.
Thank you for being here, Garrett. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Okay, let's do your action items for today. I asked Heather about ways to increase public awareness of wildfire dangers, and she said this.
One great way to mitigate wildfire risk to your public facilities and buildings while also educating the public is to have something like a demo day where the city or precinct hosts a community event and they feature a portion where fire-resistant landscaping and vegetation management are demonstrated so people can visually see what they need to do to their own property to mitigate the risk. NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association, actually holds a Wildfire Community Preparedness Day on the first Saturday of May annually. So it's going to be May 3rd this year. And if any cities or communities are interested in participating, the campaign encourages people and organizations to come together that day and raise awareness of wildfire risk and take action to reduce that risk. And of course, we have field resources that are available across the state where we can come and, support these types of events and offer information, talk with the public, different things like that.
She also mentioned something that I loved so much as a kid. The Forest Service can send Smokey Bear to your local event. So check this out.
We have Smokey Bear actually come out, and he comes and he visits schools and he spreads his wildfire prevention statement of only you can prevent wildfires. And a big thing to note, and why Smokey Bear is so important, is within Texas, 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by human activities.
I also asked Garrett for any takeaways he had, and he said this.
Don't be afraid of it. I think, a lot of times we like to use liability as a reason not to do anything. But I say a lot of times, you can argue liability on both sides of everything. And so you're also liable if you don't do anything. And mitigation, like when we talk in emergency management, I think we all know that mitigation is cheaper than recovery. Of course, now getting the support to do that can be hard. Now, that 7-mile burn, if you go and you look at some of our pictures that you've seen how effective that was, it took us 14 years before we had an event that, showed like, wow, this is why you do it. And it's clearly visible. And even if you look at those fire maps, when it gets to Borger, it's like a straight line because it ran into that. And so, of course, now we just get even more support, but we were the first full city to become FireWise certified back in like 2010, 14 years before this. So a lot of times it's the long play. Like everything else we do, we've got to commit to the long term. And it is regional. When we do these burns, we coordinate and have help from all of our regional fire departments. The volunteers come and help to learn. Amarillo is involved with us. The counties are involved with us. Potter Randall County, Hutchinson County, Gray County. We all come together. And I think for the most part throughout the state, we're all like to help each other. And so you can do that in mitigation just as well as you do in response. So, I think it's definitely worth the income or the investment, and just don't be afraid.
That's really good words to take away. Anything else you think risk pool members should know about wildfires or how Borger's dealt with it?
I think, we're always willing to answer any questions, and we already kind of do go around the country treating all that. So if anybody, wants to know more, we do have a hazard mitigation department that does all of that. They love talking about it. We can come help show you how we do it. Go online, copy our ordinance. You need help presenting to a counselor or something because you're wanting to do this. We'd be more willing to help. And remember, we might have a $600,000 budget now, but it started with $50,000.
That's really cool. And I think that kind of shows, just that last thing you said shows the spirit of partnership amongst cities in Texas and Texans and members of the risk pool. That's all for today. We'll talk again soon.
To review written materials associated with the presentation or to ask Scott a question, please visit www.tmlirp.org and click on the Stronger Together podcast link. Please remember that the information in this episode is provided for informational purposes only and doesn't constitute legal advice. We recommend that you review the podcast and the accompanying written materials with your attorney prior to taking action.